I'm getting bored here. Alright guys, it's enough.
Booze and booze.
I worked fire watch in the backcountry of Idaho for a few seasons during my 20s. It was definitely the kind of job that attracted loners and romantics. People who like to think they were escaping something, though most of us were just broke and really bad with people. And all of us love the outdoors. I wasn't immune to all that illusion. You climb a tower, or even lock yourself inside a remote cabin and call it peace, but really, it's just isolation with a paycheck. The tower that I worked most seasons in wasn't even really a tower. It was a one-room cabin perched right on top of the lip of a canyon. From the porch, you could see down into this massive ancient scar that cut across the earth like God had dragged his fingernail straight through it. There were places where the canyon dropped straight down for what looked like miles and miles, though it was probably closer to 1,000 feet. Pine trees grew like soldiers across the rim, thick and endless, and when the wind picked up, it would roar through the gorge like a train. I never got tired of that sound. Most fire watchers would bounce around between stations, but I kept coming back to that little cabin. I knew the trails better than most, did maintenance on them when they needed it, and there was just something about that place that felt settled to me, like it made peace with its loneliness. The cabin itself was built solid, thick beams, and a tin roof that would ping when the precipitation hit it right. Inside, a cot, a radio, some storage and gear, propane stove, and shelves packed dustily with logbooks and outdated field guides. No plumbing, no electricity, no other distractions. Just a window on each wall and a wraparound porch where I could sit and drink my instant coffee like I was the last man on earth. Now, the job itself was really simple. Watch for smoke, report lightning strikes, keep an eye out for hikers, and keep an eye on their direction and their behavior. The last one really never happened though. That trail out to the cabin was a steep 11-mile hike and barely even marked. Throughout my time there, I think I only ever saw one hiker come through completely by accident, and the guy looked like he was ready to throw himself into the canyon by the time he actually reached me. Every now and again, I'd hear stories from the other lookouts. Odd animal behavior, strange noises in the woods, even sightings of people who were not supposed to be out there. I would chalk almost all of it up to boredom and probably a lack of sleep. When you're that far removed from people, your mind really starts pulling pranks to keep you company. I never had any problems out there, nothing that couldn't be explained by wind or the wildlife. On the last season that I worked at cabin though, now that one was different. Something happened out there to make me pack up early, made me leave a place I thought of as my own. Spoiler alert, I've never gone back and I never will. The season had technically ended, but I agreed to stay an extra 2 weeks so the guy, some retiree named Carl, could finish a family visit before hiking in himself. I personally didn't mind. Figured I'd have a nice place to myself a little longer, especially since it lined up with my birthday. I packed in some extra rations and a book that I've been meaning to finish, and of course, a bottle of whiskey. I ended up smuggling it underneath this bundle of gear. Not much, just enough to mark the occasion. No phone, no signal, just the whisper of the pine needles and the canyon's eternal hush. Those first few days were quiet enough to make my ears ring almost every night. I would hike in the ridge in the mornings, make note of fallen limbs and overgrown brush along the main trail. I kept watch from the porch when the air got too hot to move. The ridge would shimmer in the heat waves, and sometimes if I stared too long, the whole forest seemed to sway like it was breathing itself. No fires, no smoke, just the creeping boredom that sets in when your brain runs out of things to chew on. I catch myself talking out loud a lot more than usual. At first, just practical stuff, narrating the weather log or reading labels. But by day 4, I was asking the cabin itself questions almost like it was about to answer back. That kind of isolation will really sneak up on you, drill these little holes in your routine until you start seeing shadows where there aren't any. Still, I held it together. I lost myself in that novel that I brought along, and would make short fishing trips to a nearby stream in the off hours. My birthday fell on a Thursday, and I woke up before the sunrise and quickly decided I was going to hit the stream, just about a mile downhill. That early, it was still shaded and cool. Mist was still hanging between the trees like cobwebs. I snagged my fishing pole, a few worms in a jar, and that whiskey. I figured I'd start out nice and slow, catch a few trout, sip a little, enjoy that solo birthday. This particular stream was my go-to. Never seen anybody else fish it, not for miles and miles, so it always delivered, except for on that day. I tossed my line in and watched it drift, reeled it back, nothing. Did it again, still nothing. So I switched spots, changed bait. Still getting nothing though. But the weird part wasn't the lack of bites, it was the fish themselves. There they were all right. I could see them, at least a dozen of them idling in the current, maybe 10 feet downstream. But they weren't moving. Not swimming, not nibbling, just almost like they were suspended, like somebody pressed pause on them in place. They all faced the same direction, their mouths barely even open, fins twitching like broken claw cans. I stared at them for a little while longer and took another pull off the whiskey bottle, then found myself drinking some more. Something about the way they just sat there made my skin crawl. It wasn't right. I've seen fish behave strangely before, sure. Storms, tremors, barometric shifts, but nothing like this. Dead still with their eyes glazed over like they'd seen something that I couldn't. I mean, we've all seen fish just stay still in a current. That's when they're waiting for food, but this was entirely something else. Before long, I just packed it all up, hiked back the long way, trying to shake that weird, odd feeling. The trail wound around the canyon rim, and I could see the storm clouds gathering up to the west, but that would be a little ways out. The air still smelled wet, charged up with electricity. I felt kind of brittle out there, starting to buzz and feel that pressure from the wilderness around me. Then I heard this repetitive thunk sound. It was distant but rhythmic, like something hitting wood. I stopped and listened. Nothing. Then, a few moments later, I heard it again. Thunk. And again. Thunk. It came in bursts, each separated by a few seconds. It could have been a woodpecker, I guess, but it didn't sound exactly like one. It was lower, meatier, a lot closer to something like heavy, slamming up against a wall. I picked up my pace and got back to the cabin in around 15 minutes. I was winded and jumpy. The air even felt colder now, even though the sun was still out and about, but that noise had ceased. When I entered the clearing, there were birds everywhere. Dead ones, dozens of them, piled up like garbage. They were scattered across the roof, slumped over the porch, sprawled across the dirt like somebody just dumped them out of a truck bed. I stood there frozen for a minute, not really understanding what I was looking at. As I stepped closer, I realized what had happened. They dive bombed the cabin, head first. All of their necks were bent at these impossible angles, wings broken, beaks cracked open, like somebody had taken a hammer to them. Blood and feathers coated that tin roof. A few of them were still twitching, eyes wide and empty. All in all, I counted 99. Yeah, and I know that because I buried them, all of them. I dug a pit behind the latrine with a flathead shovel, worked until my shoulders screamed at me. I couldn't really stand the sight of them, couldn't stand the idea of sleeping under all that death. It felt like the cabin had been marked somehow, or targeted, or maybe even worse, baited. Piles of dead birds would bring predators, and I wasn't prepared to deal with any of that. I know we all have these daydreams of rugged mountain men in these towers and lookout posts, but protocol keeps many of us from carrying or keeping any firearms within the premises. When the last one was in the ground, I finally headed in. I shut the door and locked it, and headed to the desk to radio in. not really knowing what I was even going to say. "Hi, I just buried 100 dead birds next to my outhouse. Over." When I reached the desk, I saw that the cord was gone. Not chewed, not frayed, but just gone. The cable that connected the speaker to the radio unit had just been removed entirely. It wasn't on the floor, not on the shelf, and nowhere inside the supply box. It was straight up just missing. Literally like somebody had come in, taken it, and walked out the door. Only the lock on the door was still bolted. The windows were shut tight. No signs of any kind of forced entry. I hadn't left the place unlocked. I was sure about that, but still, I guess it is a ratty old structure. There could be a way in I didn't know about. One loose board was really all it would take. I grabbed the spare cord from the bin under the cot, thank God for spares, and rewired the setup. Got a signal and called it in. Told them what I saw, and there was a pause on the other end before the voice said,
99 birds?
"Yeah," I responded.
Not 100.
"No, I counted." Another pause. Then the guy says,
Maybe the sun hit your roof just right, made it look like a pond or something. Birds mistake things like that all the time. They dive straight into windows, it happens.
"Sure," I said, but I didn't believe it. Not even for a second. Not 99 times, like come on. That night I found myself wide awake, sitting on the porch with my shovel across my lap, eyeing the woods. The wind didn't blow, the stars didn't twinkle, and I felt like the whole forest was watching me. And I started to wonder if I was the only thing left alive up there. The next morning, I didn't bother with my usual routine. No hike, no log entry, no coffee. Just stood at the edge of my porch, staring at the trees, waiting, watching for something to move. But the forest was frozen. No bird song, no rustling, not even the distant crack of a falling branch. Just stillness. I kept thinking about those fish back in the stream, how they sat there like toys with dead batteries. And those birds, how they didn't hit the trees or the rocks, only the cabin, my cabin, almost like they'd been drawn to it. I briefly considered packing out early. It'd be a long, miserable hike, but I had enough food to get me to the trailhead. I even loaded my pack, checked my map, and made sure that I had my compass, but I didn't leave. Something kept me anchored to that porch. Not fear exactly, it was something else. I'd call it curiosity. The sick kind that makes you slow down to look at a wreck on the highway. I didn't want to leave yet, not without knowing why. That evening, I checked the grave that I dug. Still undisturbed. No animal tracks and no sign of anything trying to dig it up. I left it alone and returned to my cabin. I should have radioed in again, pressed harder, but I didn't. It really just felt pointless, like whatever happened wasn't for anybody else to explain. The last night that I spent there, I dreamt that I was underwater. Not drowning, just floating. The world above was distorted, sun flashing off the surface, shapes moving just out of reach. I looked down and saw those fish suspended around me. Their eyes were glassy, their bodies were limp. And behind them, something massive was rising from the bottom. Not a creature exactly, just a shape, a presence. I couldn't see it clearly enough, but I felt its pull, like gravity in reverse. I woke up with a taste of dirt in my mouth, and the sheets twisted around my legs. I left that next morning, hiked out with my head on a swivel. Every sound felt like a whisper in my ear. Every branch that cracked would make me freeze. When I got to the ranger station, I turned in my log and handed over my keys. Told them I wouldn't be back next season. Nobody pushed me, and maybe they'd heard things too, or maybe not. A few weeks later, one of the other lookouts, Rodney, from a post up north, gave me a call. He said he heard about the birds and wanted to know what really happened, so I told him everything. He was quiet on the other end for a while, until he finally spoke.
There's stories about that canyon, you know, old ones, from way before the Forest Service had even marked it. My dad used to say there were places out there where the veil was thinner, where things on the other side get curious and poke through.
Now, I don't know what to believe, but I haven't camped out there alone since, and I haven't celebrated my birthday either. Not out loud anyway. I was never technically, I guess, a real fire lookout. At least not like the lifers, the ones who chase towers like storms, bouncing from park to park just to sit alone with a radio and a pair of binoculars. Me, I was just a forestry tech, a trail guy. Maintenance, signage, clearing debris, fixing busted staircases in the middle of nowhere, that kind of thing. I liked the work just fine. It was a good mix of hard labor and solitude. No tourists. No bosses breathing down your neck, just miles of trees and your own thoughts to keep you company. But in between seasons, you gotta fill the gap. And that's how I ended up doing Firewatch. Well, twice. The first time was really easy. I had this ground level cabin near the Wetlands Preserve. Barely had to climb higher than the roof. I read half a library in that time, cooked beans on a propane stove and slept like a rock. The second time was different. It was a real tower. 75 feet off the ground, swaying in the breeze like a fishing pole. They stuck it out way on the edge of a cliff in a lesser used part of the park. Probably because nobody really wanted it, but I ended up saying yes. I didn't want to go home yet, didn't want to deal with anybody, so there I went. Those first few days, I'll admit, were really rough. I had this weird motion sickness at night, like I was sleeping on a boat. You'd close your eyes and feel the wind moving through the beams, just enough to make the walls creak and your stomach flip. The vertigo would hit hardest in the mornings, standing out at the railing with a thermos full of coffee, looking down through the trap door to the stairs below. You could see the ground, but it almost didn't feel real, like it was a movie set, like you could fall straight through it. Eventually, I got used to it though. You just do. The body adjusts. I set up my little routines, weather logs, sky scans, meal prep, dumb little drawings in a sketchbook when things got really slow. I was mostly up there just to hold down the fort for a few weeks, until the next guy could rotate in. It was a fill-in gig, nothing fancy, and no big fires had yet come that year, just the occasional lightning strike way off in the distance. A couple of days, I didn't even bother putting on my boots, just long johns, a hoodie and coffee until noon. Not really bad work if you can stomach that isolation. But there was one thing, just one that started to bug me after those first few nights. A sound, always late, and it was always the same. It was kind of like a dragging scrape, something heavy being pulled across a floor. Only there wasn't a floor out there, just wind and pine needles, and the bare metal legs of the tower planted in that dirt. I ignored it. I told myself it's the raccoons or some other kind of wildlife, maybe even a shifting branch. But every single night, it came, and it always came from below. The scraping would start around the same time every single night, a little after midnight. I'd be sitting at the small desk with the radio off, maybe sketching or flipping through one of the tattered paperbacks that I found in the supply box. The sound would just roll in like it had been there the whole time, and I was only now tuning into it. It was quiet, but not distant. Not like the wind or branches against the tower. It was right there, close to me, somewhere below me. I checked the stairs the first few times, thinking maybe it was a raccoon dragging some kind of trash from under the tower, but there was never anything. Just my footprints and my gear pile, and that usual tangle of dry pine needles and dirt. I did a full walk around one afternoon, circling the base of the tower, even checked for claw marks or some kind of prints, but came up empty. I chalked it up to my usual nighttime nerves. Being alone, that far away in a tower will do some weird things to your senses. You hear a mouse and you think it's a man with a knife, that kind of thing. But still, it continued to happen around the same time with that same rhythm. Drag, scrape, silence. Drag, scrape, silence. It was really like something pacing in these long arcs, carrying something behind it. I found myself listening for it even when it wasn't there, a true phantom sound. One night, I stayed up just to catch it in the act. I lit a candle and turned off all the lights, set my sketchbook in my lap to give myself something to do. There was a storm brewing out past the ridge, flashes of lightning in the distance, thunder too far off to hear. The sky would light up every few minutes, showing massive clouds in the shimmer of the valley below. Beautiful but uneasy. I was doodling, mostly just shapes and lines, when the scrape came once more, right on time. I leaned towards the window and pressed my ear to the cold glass. Another scrape. I grabbed my flashlight but didn't flick it on yet. I waited. My heart was going now. Not panic, at least not yet. Just that electric edge that your body would get when it knows that something is off. But finally this time I caught something, movement in the trees, to the left of the tower, about 30 feet up in a pine. I squinted, and another flash of lightning lit up the whole ridge. I saw it. Well, not it, but him. It wasn't an animal, not even close. It was a man. Thin and pale, practically gray in the stormlight. He was climbing fast up that tree, hands and feet digging into the bark like he'd done it 100 times before. His limbs were super long and awkward. The way he moved, it felt and looked unnatural. No hesitation, just pure muscle memory, like it was literally instinct for him. That scraping sound was him, his boots or maybe his nails dragging up against the bark. He got around 10 feet from the top and then froze and looked right at me. I didn't move and neither did he. I'm pretty sure my eyes caught the candlelight through the window. He was maybe 40 feet from me, across empty air, dangling like some kind of broken gargoyle from a swaying branch. The wind was just rocking him gently. He didn't panic, he just stared at me. I found myself opening up the window slowly. I didn't know what else to do, and my voice came out hoarse. "Are you all right?" He twitched just a little and then launched himself backward off the tree. I thought he'd fallen straight down, like broke his neck on a stump or something, but he hit the ground running, and I mean running, like something from a nature documentary. Not a stumble, not a recovery, just full-on sprint through those trees, crashing through branches and all, just gone in seconds. I slammed my window shut, hands shaking, and grabbed the radio, switched it to the base, and started talking. "This is Copper Tower. I got something down here. A man, not a hiker." The voice on the other end crackled back after a pause.
Say again, Copper, you got a what?
"A man," I said, "climbing trees like a damn animal. He took off when I made contact. He's not right in the head. I think he's dangerous, possibly even on drugs." Another pause. Then the voice got serious.
Copy that. Lock your doors, arm yourself if possible. We'll dispatch a ranger team. They can be there by morning. Just sit tight.
"Sit tight, sure. No problem, just me and the tree climber all alone in these woods." I checked the locks and then loaded the single-shot .22 that I kept under the bed. I sat by the door with the lights off. The storm never arrived. It just hovered across the canyon, flashing occasionally. And the man came back. I heard him just before 3, low and dragging those footsteps again at the base of the tower. This time though, something smacked against the beam. Once, twice, then this rapid series of taps, like somebody drumming a stick against the supports. It wasn't hard, not like he was trying to knock it over, just enough to let me know that he was there. Enough to make my blood pressure hit the roof. He did that for hours, circling, tapping, sometimes scraping, sometimes just breathing loud enough for me to hear through the gaps in the floorboards. He may have even been talking to himself. I didn't sleep, just sat there in the dark holding the gun, waiting for the sun to come back and burn this nightmare away. By the time the sky had started bleeding pink along the horizon, I felt like I'd been awake for months. My eyes were dry, my hands were numb from gripping the rifle. I heard the birds first, real ones this time, chirping and flitting through the trees like nothing had ever taken place. No trace of last night, no footsteps, no stick tapping, no whispering, just the regular old ordinary morning hum of the forest. Then I heard some voices, 2 of them, male, calling out from the trail.
Copper Tower, this is Ranger Team Support, approaching from your east side. Come to the window if you can hear us.
I nearly cried. I pushed myself up, knees aching, and went to the eastern window. Sure enough, I saw them, 2 guys in green jackets, hiking up the incline below the tower, ears stripped to their backs, radio clipped to their shoulders. I popped the window and yelled down.
Up here. You're close. He was around the area you're coming through.
They nodded and gestured for me to hang tight, and I pointed to the pine tree, the one where I saw him climb.
It's that tree. He was up there last night and then took off that way.
I waved towards the tree line, pointing out the direction he'd gone to. They stopped at the base of the tree and did a quick sweep, walking in slow circles, inspecting the ground. One of them bent down and pulled something off a low branch and held it up. Even from up top, I could see the shimmer catch the morning light. Pink nylon. When they climbed the tower, I opened up the trap door and stepped back. The taller one went first. His boots were loud on the metal steps. He was holding up an item from the tree in his hand, and as he came up, I saw it clearly, a small pink backpack. One of those glittery ones that little kids wear with sequins and a plastic butterfly sewn onto the front. He held it out like he didn't want to touch it more than he had to. "This was hanging from one of those branches," he said, "right where you pointed." He unzipped it slowly, like he was expecting something alive inside. Then he tilted it, its contents spilling out into the floor between us. Kids' clothing, tiny socks, a little yellow shirt with cartoon dogs on it, and underwear. I felt sick. Then the other ranger spoke. "We followed those prints that you mentioned, but they were all over the place. They looped around and doubled back like he was pacing, or maybe trying to throw us off." He then looked out the window. The thing is, we didn't see any adult-sized footprints near the base of that tree, just really small ones, like really small. "You said you saw an adult, right?" "Yeah, we made eye contact even. There was lightning and moonlight, but there was no mistaking it. It was an adult." "Huh," they said at the same time. Then the tall one just followed up with, "Probably just a backpacker trying to get oriented." I didn't say anything back. I just found myself staring at the pile of clothes on the floor, the pink backpack, the way the morning light was making the glitter flicker. To my knowledge, they never found anybody, and there was no missing persons report that matched any of the items. Nothing. I think I towered one more time after this and gave it all up. It just wasn't for me. I worked as a seasonal fire lookout for just under a decade. Not the kind of guy with a grand plan or a pension waiting, just a man who likes solitude, mountains, and the feeling of being the only heartbeat within 100 miles. I bounced around a lot. Idaho, Utah, Montana, Washington, wherever the towers were high and the pay was steady enough to keep a roof over my head for the off-season. Some guys hate that kind of loneliness, but me, I crave it. I've always found that the further I get from people, the more my head seems to clear. I meditate, I work out, I write things down in a little black journal that I've carried since my second season. Being alone isn't lonely when you've got discipline and a solid routine. The best towers, in my opinion, were always the oldest ones, the creaky bastards with rusted staircases, fire-scorched plaques, and windows fogged from decades of storms. They had the real character, and usually they were more remote enough that no hikers ever would wander too close. There's no cell service, no roads, just a box in the sky with a cot and a radio. About halfway through my career, I got assigned a post in Washington State, one of the deep ones. 9-mile hike in, an elevation gain the whole way. No backup unless you wanted to wait for a day or somebody to stumble through the ridgeline. I was pretty excited for that one. The forest there itself was really old too. The kind of old where the trees don't even move much, not even in the wind. You can feel it in the soil, in the air, like the place remembers everything from before. At first, it really was that kind of dream spot I was hoping it to be. The tower stood tall, 50, maybe 60 feet off the ground, metal frame bolted to a series of rock slabs. When I got up there and unlocked the cabin, it felt like I stepped inside a time capsule. A couple of old ratty notebooks were on the shelves, a mug somebody had carved initials into, a stack of weather logs dating back to the 70s. I spent the first couple of weeks logging in those cloud patterns, checking ridges for smoke and making journal entries. Oh, and cooking over a camp stove. Just me and the trees. You really can't ask for more. I think the only real issue was the rain. Washington does not mess around when it comes to rain. You can hear it coming from miles off, like a freight train moving through the sky. One storm in particular rolled through in the middle of the night, woke me up with thunder that was rattling the glass. I got up and pulled on my boots and started watching for lightning strikes. That's the job after all. It's not the fires you see that get you, it's the ones you miss. Through my binoculars, I watched 4 or 5 strikes hitting down over the ridge, and one of them sparked something. Just a faint orange glow in the dark deep inside of a canyon. I made a note and radioed it in, standard protocol. But when I lowered my binoculars, I saw something that was not standard at all. There was somebody at the base of the tower, a figure, black and still. I couldn't quite make out any details, just this silhouette against the tree line, maybe 10 feet from the base of the stairs. I stared at it, waiting for it to move. Then the lightning flashed again and it was gone. I sat there for quite a while, gripping the edge of the window, watching the clearing around the base of the tower like it was about to blink, and I didn't see any movement. No more shadows, no branches shaking, nothing. Just the wind driving sheets of rain sideways and the fog starting to crawl out of the tree line. It had to be a trick of the light, right? Some kind of bent shadow cast by the tower itself. Maybe even a tree stump that I didn't notice. That kind of thing happens all the time out here. Your eyes get too hungry in the dark, and they start feeding you all kinds of lies. Still, I slept with the axe right next to the cot that night. The next few days, things returned to normal. Cloudy, damp, but quiet, and I went about the job per usual, logging the weather, monitored the fire activity, and wrote my journal. I did a long meditation one afternoon where I stood outside on the catwalk, just breathing and listening. The air had this sharp, clean taste to it, like the storm had scared the forest into hibernation. And I remember thinking maybe I need to stay out here longer next year. This was really the kind of peace that sticks to your bones. Out of nowhere, the door handle rattled. It was a week later and I just climbed into bed, stretching out, pulling the sleeping bag over me, and I let my mind start to drift. I was right on the edge of sleep, hovering in that place where you're aware but not sinking, and I heard the steps, slow and creeping, climbing up the ramp. No way it was a raccoon, definitely not the wind. It was footsteps, heavy enough for me to register them. I opened up my eyes and held my breath, and the sound stopped just outside the door. Then the handle jerked, fast and hard, a single angry rattle. Then another came, more violent this time, like somebody was trying to tear the door right off the frame. I sat up fast and reached for the axe with one hand, the flashlight with the other. When the rattling stopped, I heard no footsteps after, no retreat, just dead silent. I think I waited 5 minutes before I moved, and the wind had picked up outside. I couldn't hear anything beyond the occasional creak of the tower. Finally, I stood up and unlocked the door and flung it open with the axe raised high. Nothing. I stepped out into the catwalk and shone the flashlight down the stairs. No movement, just my breath in the beam of the light and the whisper in the cold wind. I circled that platform and still found nothing, but I will admit I could feel something like a weight in the air, like somebody had just backed away just far enough to keep watch on me. I didn't sleep at all that night, and the next one was far worse. I was journaling, trying to write everything off. It was an isolation dream, paranoia from the storm, maybe even sleep paralysis. Halfway through a sentence when I heard a voice, low and echoing, crawling through the trees. And it wasn't a yell or even a word. It was a chant. At first, I really did think it was the wind dragging some kind of sound across the valley. But then I recognized the rhythm in it, the cadence. The same phrases repeated, in a tongue that I didn't know but felt wrong in my gut. Latin maybe, or something else. Every syllable was familiar yet alien at the same time. It was coming from the forest below, but also from all the sides, the roof, the walls, almost like the trees itself were mouthing the words. I stood frozen for quite some time, not even breathing. My heart was banging out a war rhythm of its own. The voice continued, louder, closer. Then it would drift, then surge again. I grabbed the only thing near me that had some weight, a small smooth rock that I'd been painting during my quiet hours. I stepped out into the balcony and tried to pinpoint where this chanting was the thickest. The tower creaked and the wind curled around me. I hurled the rock hard and straight into the trees in front of me. Almost immediately that chanting stopped, just like that. No fade, no stumble, just gone, like flipping a switch. I didn't hear anything after that. No footsteps, no whispers, not even the wind. I stood there in the stillness for a solid minute before backing up into the tower and locking the door behind me. I laid that axe across my chest as I slept that night, if you can really call what I did sleeping. When the morning came, I couldn't sit still. I needed to move. My adrenaline was still running hot. I boiled some coffee and got my boots on. Decided to do a gear check hike. It was something I usually did every few weeks. Check the trail in and make sure the trail cams hadn't been knocked loose by the wind or the animals. Really though, I just needed to feel my feet on the dirt again. I was halfway down the stairs when I smelled smoke. Not burning wood, a campfire. Somebody had a fire going somewhere, which meant somebody was out here, and I didn't know who. I stopped where I was, about halfway down the ramp, and peered off through the trees. Maybe 200 feet from the tower, tucked in this tight little pocket of trees, was this minimalist campsite. One tent, one fire, and a man sitting cross-legged beside it, sipping from a mug. I watched him for a while, long enough for him to look back and finally notice me. "Morning," he called out. I nodded. "Didn't even know anybody else was out here. When'd you get in?" "Oh, I've been moving around for the past 3 days. Last night here," he said. "Been backpacking in pretty much every direction, and I really love this spot." I studied him. Mid-40s, maybe, scruffy and calm. But one detail stood out above the rest. He had a fresh black eye, swollen shut, ugly purple and yellow blooming around it. Very strange in my delicate state of mind. We chatted a little more, small talk, you know. He said he always stops by this tower when he's in the area, said he's been doing it for years. I asked him if he knew how remote this place really was. He just smiled back. "Yeah, that's what makes it really special." After a few more pleasantries, I told him I was heading back up. Didn't want to crowd him, and the truth was, I wanted nothing to do with that guy. With everything that was happening and then him suddenly just popping up at the base of the tower, I was weirded out. "Fair enough," he said, lifting his mug in the salute. I started walking back up, and when I reached the platform, he called out once more. "Hey," he said. "Hell of an arm you've got." I turned around. What? He raised his mug and said,
"You nailed me."
with a wink. Before I could respond, he just turned back to his little fire. I stood there outside the cabin for a bit, hand resting on the railing, just watching him sip from that mug like we swapped campfire recipes instead of something closer to a confessional. "Nailed me," he'd said, like it was a joke between buddies. He didn't act hurt, he didn't act angry, just almost pleased, like I'd done something that finally let him relax. I paced around a little, looking for other evidence in the area. I kept looking back down through the trees, but he never glanced back up again. He just sat there, fire crackling softly, steam rising up from the cup. It was like he belonged to the place or had a deed and owned it, like he'd never even left it before. When I got back inside, the door locked behind me, and I didn't touch my journal. I didn't radio it in, not yet. I just sat in the center of the room, arms on my knees, just listening, waiting, wondering if he'd show up again that night, if the whispering would indeed return, if I'd wake up to the sound of boots climbing up the ramp, and return a rock flying back through my window this time. He was gone by late morning though. I watched the smoke from his campfire dwindle down to nothing by noon. No footprints, no trash left behind, just empty trees and a thin column of ash curling up from the fire ring. When I finally hiked down to check the site, the ground was cold, the tent was gone, and there was no trace of him whatsoever. I reported it that evening, told base I encountered this hiker camped near the tower, which was technically against regulations, but he'd already cleared out. I mentioned the black eye and the strange timing of his visit, and also the things that I'd heard. They didn't really respond back with much, just logged it. Then the senior guy came to the radio, older voice who was slower, and asked,
"What do you look like?"
I described him again, got a pause and then a response.
"Yeah, we've had reports like that. Birdsong said he saw him 3 days ago. Cloud Tower the year before that. Same kind of deal, shows up, makes noises at night, and then disappears. Never the same season twice though."
I asked if anybody had ever caught him.
"Not that we know of. Some people think that he lives out there, and I know a couple of people who won't work on that tower just because of that guy."
That was that. I wrapped up my season a few weeks later and hiked out like nothing had even taken place. Didn't talk about it with anybody else until months had passed, and the memory didn't burn quite so hot. But there are occasions while I'm lying in my bed in a quiet room, and I'll hear the click of a door handle, the shuffle of feet on metal stairs, a voice with no breath behind it, murmuring nonsense from hundreds of yards away. And when I do, I always picture that man sitting cross-legged by the fire, sipping from a mug with his swollen eye and his knowing smile. "Hell of an arm," he'd say. It didn't click with me at first, at least not until the return hike to the ranger station. That black eye he had had was because of me, and sadly, I don't have a great ending for this story for you, as it's a mystery to me just as much as it probably is to you. My one takeaway? When in doubt, when in danger, hit it with a big rock.